a lot of pressure, I think, for everybody coming into this, just because, like, it's new support buffs. That's a new thing that can be invaded now. The Draugr is a very important mark of this map that I think is going to give the Dragons, depending on how they draft, a little bit of pressure, but it also could go towards the Leviathans with the way we've seen them controlling their lanes lately.
And that's the fun part about this whole, like, movement speed changes, no boots being available any longer. It's now just all about your relevant spikes from your power and the items that you choose to acquire. And for tanks,
changes.
And that's the thing, is that, like, for Leviathans, I have to imagine that a lot of the focus is probably going to stay around that front line pick.
Yeah, and honestly, I'm curious to see the Guardians, and because, the tank boots were kind of crucial. Like, they just felt really good. They were really good stats-wise for a front line. And now that you're missing that, I want to know where a lot of these guys are going to go, because a lot of CCR was also stripped off of other items. That was one of the things that made it so strong, was the fact that you're able to walk in, get stunned, and it means nothing to you anymore. And so watching I think, like, the early game is going to be very evenly matched to what we expect, right? It's going to still be similar starter items, a couple of changes that went for those, but there were some relic changes. I know, like, a couple days ago I saw a few of the supports messing around with the new meditation to see how exactly that feels, and just, like, seeing these little details throughout their builds that are going to make things a little more interesting.
Well, it might be a new split and a new meta, Gore, but one thing will always stay the same, and that's that Hurrywin is never allowed to play Giannis, not with the way that he has been able to perform on that character. Mercury as well, another strong priority pick here for the Leviathans. Makes sense given the changes to movement speed. Mercury, probably one of the gods to receive a little bit of an indirect buff, plus the fact that Sam's just insane with that god.
Yeah, it's one of those things, looking at this, you would never have guessed anything had changed, right? Because this is exactly what was getting banned against the Dragons. And admittedly, all of them, maybe Mercury is an exception to it, but it feels like they're all still doing incredibly well. Like, Tiamat and Gilgamesh, a lot of their power is in the kit, not necessarily in the itemization. The itemization does help them, but it's not going to be the end-all, be-all. The Leviathans, the bans that they've gone for, it's just 3 really good picks. I mean, we've seen 3 members on the Dragons play Fenrir. Sam's Mercury has ended games, and not necessarily careers yet, but it could be on that pace if people do let it through. And the same thing could be said for Hurrywin's Giannis. So it's just a lot of control to make sure they're locked down.
A ton of front line still available on the board, though. It's so many mid laners and junglers largely being looked at here. Raijin, Gilgamesh, Tiamat, Fenrir, Mercury, Giannis, Gore. There is a lot of mobility that's immediately been stripped away, and Leviathans are just going to take this first pick opportunity to take Soul for themselves. Soul still relatively hot on the market in terms of god preference.
And I actually really like this, not just because I think it's going to be a good pickup for the Leviathans, like Soul has been doing really well, but it does feel like this is a shot directly at Hurrywin. Like, I see Tiamat taken away, Raijin banned away, the Dragons took those away, but with Giannis and Soul, Hurrywin has a wide god pool, but those are like the top picks that he's going to go to and at least perform with. His Scylla is up there, but otherwise, in his top 5 personally, they're all gone here.
You would expect, at least, but when it comes to Hurrywin, man has a very deep god pool that I just think some teams haven't necessarily had a chance to explore, given the way that drafts tend to go.
Who needs to pick Merlin if Giannis is available, right? Like, if Raijin's available, I don't need to go down to my 6th pick yet.
I like the Guan Yu response, though, from the Leviathans. That's definitely some heavy dive introduction and mild flexibility being introduced, but Yamoja going to strip away a little bit more of that flexibility aspect. A nice solidified front line here from the Leviathans, though, and a ton of self-sustain reigning through so far from this top 3.
I mean, Soul's good at just surviving on her own, but then Guan Yu comes in, all of a sudden, not like you said, like just the self-sustain, but the team heal that comes from him and Yamoja. A lot of interesting things. Plus the Yamoja, like a couple of changes coming into this with the way that her Omi's going to work and like the way you build her for how that works. It's instead just getting ticked up at levels as opposed to based on the build that you have in there. So it's going to be something that was already really scary to let Wrong You have. Now he has, I want to say, slightly more control over what he's going to be able to see. It's going to make things problematic for the Dragons.
But can't get too all in on this Leviathan's composition so far, Gore. Have to remember, there's already one limitation being introduced here for the Jade Dragons, and that's Amir. Those are the walls. If Amir is able to find really strong placements on those walls, Cavalry Charge, River's Rebuke, those abilities can become incredibly difficult to follow up on if they're being restricted to only X amount of playing space. And with the bans that have come through for the Jade Dragons, they're choosing to take away the Circuit, trying to eliminate as much as that backline dive as possible. Curious, though, to see some of the transitions that might take effect for the Soul Lane. I have a feeling, Gore, that we're not going to see as many Warriors as we once did.
Yeah, that's the thing. I think a lot of people have slowly been transitioning, right? A couple more Guardians have been coming through. They feel stronger, yet nothing necessarily, I want to say, big on them. I even saw, I think, on like the Smite Pro Reddit, people were like, so where's Cabrakan been lately? And I think that's kind of the conversation a lot of people are opening themselves up to, right? Cthulhu, notably, was somebody that was really big last year. Like, that conversation of solo Guardians, especially with Jormungandr getting a buff, it opens up the play style for, I think, a lot of these players.
And Jade Dragons, they seem to be taking note of the Leviathans, Shinto specifically with the Morrigan, not totally convinced that this soul is necessarily geared for Shinto. Could be a possibility that Horkord actually winds up with that magical ADC presence, and Raven actually going to be the jungler selection of choice. Have to assume it's for the jungle at least, because Mystic Rush is a great utility tool, I think, for just harassing the backline from Leviathans, and when you're dealing with the likes of a Soul and Baba Yaga, there's so much burst between those two gods, but a Raven can definitely make a pretty steep impact against those characters.
Now, if I had to make a money bet as to who was going to be the first person to play Baba Yaga, Mifflin just gave me a very specific look. I said if I had to, very key words over there, Mifflin. As to who was going to play Baba Yaga first, I would have put it almost all on Heroin, because he's the only one who was playing it last year. He's the one who's played it this year. And a lot of people, like, there's been some mumblings about Baba Yaga being much more prominent as a mage, but it was not necessarily something I expected Shinto to be the one to whip out.
Yeah, you excited? I'm hyped, dude. I'm pumped for this. The vines are gone, thank God. Thank you, Sir Ajax. I don't know, man. The vines are just so hard to deal with, and how often do you just walk into the jungle and all of a sudden, oh, a vine spawned in front of me immediately and I'm dead?
Learned to look at your mini-map and realize the buffs respawn. It wasn't that difficult,
It
was it?
was. It was hard.
All right, let's get back on track, though, real quick. What did we see in terms of starts? Well, red buffs taken by the Hunters and mid laners again. Supports still did the purple buff. No starts are green in this one. We'll talk about picks soon as we watch PandaCat getting aggressive early against your core, who is piloting this soul. And that was one question I was wondering, is exactly where that soul will go until we saw that Baba Yaga locked in.
Man, and Baba Yaga, I think, is going to have a really good time, especially after this patch. You don't have to go into those boots anymore, so now you can get those stacking items online pretty quickly, and the stacking items have decent stats on them already. I mean, if that's a Warlock staff coming through here for Shinto, well, you're getting 10% penetration, you're getting a lot of survivability, and you're not sacrificing that movement speed because, again, at level 7, you're going to have that full 16%.
An Alpha Harpier invade attempt as Mike takes a bit of poke damage there, gets a cleanse off PandaCat, but the pressure is still on Mike, who's just trying to waddle his way back towards his tier 1 tower. Panitom on the rotation too, just to make sure Sam wasn't here, and instead it's Leviathan's going to take the Alpha Harpier, at least attempt to this time round. I will say you talked about stacking items there on Baba Yaga. Well, interestingly enough, the Hunters, which we've seen some of, at least with the competitive players who've been streaming, we've seen a lot of these rushes of attack speed over going stacking items, which is an interesting one for me, because in the early game, getting those stacking items online quicker, technically, because you don't have to go boots and worry about it, would have been what I would have expected. Tyrannical Plate Helm is something that's come up a couple of times to me. I don't know if we're necessarily going to see it here today for Fine OK.
I bet we will.
It is an option.
Yeah, I certainly think we will. It's just core. It was core on this god before the change, and it's core now.
Oh, gank on the left-hand side. Nice little walls coming down from Wrong Yu. Mike's trying to buy as much time as he can. Will use his ultimate to try and avoid some of the CC. Follow-up is there, but a wall prevents some of the damage. Your core held his halt the entire time. And you can see the damage put out from PandaCat there towards Wrong Yu wasn't enough for a kill. First blood, the way of Leviathans.
What thin margins there, man. Wrong Yu makes it out with sub 50 HP, and, well, that's 49 more than you need. Julio, though, in a little bit of trouble.
And now Julio trying to use the cavalry charge to get back towards the tower. One thing we've not spoken on just yet is the amount of walls in this game, with Cabrakan being included, Ymir too. And the way Leviathan's composition is here, they're not the most mobile for escaping some of these walls.
No, Panatom and Julio in particular are going to have a very hard time dealing with these walls. Cavalry charge from Guan Yu, well, essentially a non-factor if PBM's playing around it with his own wall. That's 7 seconds of Guan Yu riding Epona into an ice-frigid wall. Or it could be even Fine OK using his own to try and stop it in its tracks.
Ymir freezing mid lane on Wrong Yu as the pressure's there with Horrorwind following up, but Panitom was wrapping around the back, continuing the pressure onto Mike again. Panitom getting very low, however, the sustain should come through through sooner rather than later, as Shinto will get credit for the kill on Mike again. But let's have a little look at that tyrannical plate helmet a little bit more.
Yeah, just all ally or lane minions rather gain 20% HP and attack speed, which means that you could sit inside the lane and be a little bit stronger, but it's the stats. It's that raw stat stick. Not just 85 power, 20% crowd control reduction, and with Wingblade eating a nerf this patch, it's one of the best ways to get it.
Not that important. Sam, though, may need some crowd control reduction and will get a wall to help him out and leap away with his ultimate. Still the chase is on from Leviathans, though. Pinching Mike again, and Mike realizes he's stuck between a rock and a wet place as Panitom then crashes on in. The ultimate from Polar Bear Mike will go off, but it won't be enough to kill Panitom, and Horiwin just doesn't have the damage at this stage to follow up. Panda was rotating a little bit too late to the pot. Also really attack speed focus with Pen yet again. Just keeping an eye on these builds because I'm just interested where people go without no boots anymore. The world's your oyster. For me, I'd just go for the zoomies, movement speed, and thinking of that, I'm a support player. Well, both the supports have done that just too.
Yeah, Relic Dagger selection for Wrong Yu, gonna have his beats available all the time, and Mike's in Wingblade for Mike.
Has to try and rotate away, the walls come crashing down, he's pinned it again. Mike on an island, round the back comes Sam for Soccer, trying to dissuade them though from continuing. Not enough to stop Polar Bear Mike falling, and Sam gets stunned! Woo! 2, and Horiwin will die to Panitom, but Panda will at least get one turnaround kill there. Great play from Leviathans once again. It was Jade Dragon stepping up with Mike, and immediately Leviathans turn on him.
Well, that's the majority of his survivability, and between Ymir Wall and Kabrakan Wall, going to be very easy to lock down this jungler.
Pyromancer started up here by Leviathans. Panitom dropping slightly low as Sam turns up on the scene, and he will go in aggressive, looking for the pick. Panitom gets his ultimate off though, and looking to regen before Horiwin can rotate in. And Polar Bear Mike keeping Wrong Yu at bay as Julio now trying to body block almost to get some separation. But look at the damage from Shinto onto Sam there.
Yeah, Shinto's damage is nothing to be scoffed at this point. I take it back. I said maybe they'd be looking at Panitom. There is a clear threat on the board, Hindu, and his name is Shinto. This guy cannot be allowed to free cast if the Jade Dragons want to take a team fight. He's just incredibly safe on this god. Disapparate's still incredibly strong, has beads and Aegis available, and take a peek at his build. That is a ton of sustain. Spear the Magus has lifesteal on it, Typhon's Fang as well, and his objective damage with his Telkine's Ring pickup is going to be huge. Watch this gold green melt.
And don't forget, Vamp Shroud is a starter item with the lifesteal.
That's so fast.
Your eyes kind of lit up there as the damage comes through, and that is because Panitom's there too, in fairness. With all that auto attack speed build from him, it's just continuing this trend for Leviathans, who have got a good grasp on game one here.
They do. Jade Dragon still reeling from that loss up against the Scarabs, looking to try and find something back up against the Leviathans, but already 17 minutes in, we're off to a rough start, to say the least. Leviathans removing the first neutral objective and establishing a commanding 3,000 gold lead.
Shinto with a slight level lead in mid lane, now one level over Horiwind. More importantly, those stacks are coming online for the Charon's Coin next after a fully stacked Warlock staff. Will become more of a problem. Horiwin tries to rotate round, gets knocked on by Panitom, and that forces a blink out of fine. Okay, getting aggressive with the walls too. Tremors come down in the stun to get both of them as now the walls drop down by Wrong Yu. Panda Cat's rotation though causes a problem as Mike blinks over, tries to drop the wall, but Sam on the backside tries to take on Shinto 1v1, and in fairness he kind of lost that, but Panda Cat will answer back. Can Final K escape? The answer's yes.
Yarkor not happy with how that one pans out, despite coming out slightly ahead inside the engagement. Sam for Soccer for Panitom trade, and tries to move himself back forward. Jade Dragons, though, not going to give him the engagement, and instead, maybe a tier 1 siege here that's low HP, and Fine OK and Mike are already back in base.
Yeah, no ultimates available, though, from the Leviathans to do this. Just trying to whittle it down with these basics where they can with Sol. More importantly, though, you can just see the sustain this composition has. They've got the Guan Yu healing, the sustain from Sol on her own, and then on top of that, you've still got your Moja. And that's why after the fight, as long as nobody dies on the side of Leviathans, they can resustain and go again.
Going for the Sunder is going to help out, but it's maybe not so easy to execute on with that root. Use root Sunder, well, that's not a lot of CC for your team to follow up on.
Well, Dragons are out of this yet, and with this Pyromancer pull with 4 of them here, Leviathans are in great position to defend. They're kind of watching on here, looking for a cheeky steal over the wall if possible, as Dragons do secure that. But as they exit, Leviathans get aggressive, walking into the jungle, Panitom wrapping around the side, along with the whole of the Leviathan squad.
Yeah, look at that ward coverage. Jade Dragons spot out that aggression, and the Leviathans aren't able to catch much there, but they do force the Jade Dragons all the way back to their own speed buff, creating so much space. Leviathans don't have a ton of wards in pocket, though, so instead, just going to go ahead and move into the tier 1.
You do get to see Baba, the strength of Baba Yaga's passive here, too, with that house and the stacking. Look at the Karan's coins. Look at where Horriwin built his and how the game's gone for him. Look at the stacks on Baba Yaga there. 6 on that Karan's coin already. And the Warlock staff. Very, very impactful.
Since then, has not shied away even since. So I think he's doing just fine. It pulls ahead, as you already highlighted. 1 level lead for Ymir out of the jungle. Does finally start to get some of that physical defense online for him as well with that stack.
From Mike freezes onto Shinto. Full focus on Shinto. The Baba Yaga under pressure. Not enough damage from Sam though to follow up as Paniton went towards fine okay. Reset happens for a second or two as the tanks fall back again. No one really unscathed there. Beads, however, consumed for Shinto for Mike's blink.
That's a great trade. Shinto's been so impactful inside of these engagements, so anything Mike can do to make it easier for Sanford Soccer or Fine OK to close gap onto him is going to be great, especially considering Primal Fury's up.
Weird fight over the Oracles there. Goes the way of the Dragons as Julio slips the noose for a second from that wall. These wall placements going to be important for both teams, and Rongyu so far having the better end of it, even though he's up against 2v1 in terms of walls here. Sam, though, on this left-hand side, just waiting for a window to wrap round the back. He's always sneaky, this assassin in the jungle, or this assassin player for the majority. Julio, though, straight to the back, looks towards Horriwin. Horriwin trying to defend himself as Paniton racks around there. Same can be said for Sam for Soccer, looking at your call, but Disapparate's buying him time, and the damage is good from your call for the kill. Julio gets hold of Sam for Soccer and takes his life too, as Horriwin does manage to get back to base. 2 members of the Dragons fall there.
Nobody on the Dragons was trying to peel out for Hurrywin. Panatom loses the 1v1 essentially up against this Merlin and then just walks through the entirety of the Jade Dragons at 10% HP. Truth be told, Leviathans do get the better end of that backline engagement, taking out both Sam and Fine OK, but maybe a little bit of a miscommunication. Need to make sure Hurrywin's allowed to get his damage off if he wants to have a dream of matching up with what Shinto's been able to do already. 12,000 damage.
Leviathans are up for this one today. Onto the fire jump we go at 24 minutes in. Dragons realize they're not in an opportune moment to even contest this. Will we see Panda go for the Draugr? That's my only real question. Will it help even? This series between Dragons. What is the meta? What do I build? What do I pick? Who's OP? Who do I scream at when we lose the games because they pick this? So maybe is it mainly they're really worried about losing the Phoenix, so hold the line and let them take this goal?
If they do end up taking a fight, will likely be inside the Phoenix, and they need to win out on that initial engagement of the Leviathan.
Not too long left on it. They should be able to get that tier 2 tower on the right-hand side. Maybe look for a Phoenix Siege. Would you go for a Phoenix Siege here?
With the grouping we're seeing for the Leviathans, it feels a little bit iffy. They're going to have less than a minute, less than 40 seconds, really, to start sieging this Phoenix, but might as well put it to the test, see if the Jade Dragons have defense. They don't have to overcommit here through the Leviathans. Instead, just see it, get a heat check.
Keep an eye on the Curse Dunk from Fine OK. If that goes off in the fight, Dragons will be looking to be as aggressive as they can. Sam has been busy the last few minutes, just farming as much as he can, trying to get a bit more damage online. Going for that cloak earlier on for defense has definitely cost him in burst potential in these engagements.
He has 30 seconds left on this Fire Giant push, and Jade Dragons are utilizing that wall, but Panda Cat is getting dove by Julio.
Julio goes in, cavalry charge down along with the blink that went with it. Beads also consumed as Sam did go in and gets back out again from the walls. But it's Mike who's trapped in the pit again, and Mike ends up falling down. The rest of the team isolated away as the whole of the Leviathans march on in. Shinto does not care about doing Phoenix damage. That's the Soul's job as he marches into the throne room looking to get more kills. Instead, Leviathans, with a little bit of time left for the FG, about to wear off now, are looking for the middle Phoenix without any minions.
Hurrywin dropped down to half HP for just thinking about stepping up on the defense. Jade Dragons have got their work cut out for them here. 4 versus 5 to maintain the base.
The middle Phoenix is still taking time to go down. Hurrywin knocked to half health as Panitom did blink in and get aggressive there. Middle Phoenix still stands. Hurrywin limps back. They'll get the Phoenix here, but I don't think they can go into necessarily end the game. You can see immediately Leviathan start to turn tail and head towards the Primal Fury.
Or maybe this left side Phoenix. They still have 5 seconds left on Mike, but no, we're going to go ahead and play it safe. The
Where did it go wrong for the Dragons this game?
It's got to be around those early mid-game fights. They were getting so much pressure, the Leviathans that is, around these neutral objectives, around these mid-camps as well, controlling not only the Totem Aku, but the Draugr. It just felt like the Jade Dragons were really reliant on Mike to get the aggression started off right. And, well, he went 0-4 in about as many minutes.
Yeah, the emoji definitely caused a lot of problems. For me, Rongyu really has been a fantastic pick onto this emoji from Rongyu here, and it's caused a lot of problems. But more importantly, I think the backline, the one thing is if your backline can't survive because they're getting dove, and your front line can't get the kills because they can't keep the damage up or get through all the beads, relics, and safety advantages that Leviathan's composition has. Dragons are back to the storyboard, sorry, back to the drawing board, I should say, for game 2. And I think it'll come down to picks and bans at the start, because I think they did draft decent pressure in these lanes. I don't think there was any real issues with pressure. But as the game went on, the problems is that, for me, it's Yamoja.
That execution on field, man. If Mike got off to a better start,
Like,
but maybe we hold that thought. Final K's in.
Did get a stun on Yorko, who didn't panic whatsoever or use a relic whatsoever. Final K, they're very tanky in the front line. Walls drop down, and the tremors on Panitom. Meanwhile, on the backside, you can see Sam trying to whittle down the health bar. Shinto is getting low, but he'll fall back to safety. Pulled in was Yorko there, who uses the Aegis to avoid the Phoenix shot. But Shinto still goes down to Hurrywind. A great play from the Dragons. And maybe they can hold some of their base now. Right-hand Phoenix is respawning momentarily. I just wonder if they'll get there in time to stop that. Or will the minions do the work for them? I think Leviathans realize that, so they're continuing the siege on left.
They've already full sustained as well. Julio, full HP. Rongyu, the exact same. They're trying to maintain that pressure to let those waves in.
But that minion wave went all the way through. Phoenix haven't spawned just yet. So 3 members of Dragons just trying to hold on to this Phoenix and the wall to try and stop the autos coming through. But look at the damage Panitom's doing. And that just allows Julio and Yorko to combine for Yorko to get a double kill. All 3 Phoenixes down for a second. And now the Titan stands under threat.
It does. Mid-Phoenix might be a pit stop on the way, though. Fireman Wave's already in, and the Phoenix spawning very soon. Wow. So much time to work with. So 40 seconds left on the duo lane of the Jade Dragons.
So respect from Leviathans, not just diving in to try and end this. They're trying to bring the minions through in all the lanes. And it looks like they may even rotate round to right. They were waiting for the middle Phoenix, that's for sure. Now Final K under pressure. Look at the damage because of the shred from Tallow Assault 2. Rongyu credited with a kill. 2-0 in 11. As Sam blinks into the backline, looking at Yorko again, but can't get enough damage to bring him down again. Julio looking to try and get the cavalry charge off, turns on Hurrywind as Sam tries to give him the rope-a-dope. It won't be enough, and game 1 is going to go to the Atlantis Leviathans. And in fairness, I never felt they looked uncomfortable in that game at all.
Starting in game number 2, I do not imagine they are going to let this come through. I mean, I love this because you get to watch the perspective. First off, you get Yarkor having a really good start, I would say, for this Soul to kick things off. The Baba Yaga fit in really well, but every single one of these, again, their highlights always seem to fit the same. There's Rongyu just somewhere in there. Maybe we're not immediately seeing some plays being made, but you know, either right before the clip or right after the clip, he was driving this force forward, and I think that's the biggest thing for this team. And realistically, is just that they look too good. Everything they had, all of their draft, it was too sustained, too survivable, too much. The Dragons couldn't get back there and disrupt them the way they needed to, and they just got to run away with it.
No such thing as too much of a good thing, though, for the Atlantis Leviathans here in Gamer 1. They loved all of that sustain, but couldn't help but notice a lot of these team fights were just so heavily one-sided for the Leviathan, and simply because I love the concept from the Jade Dragons. I like the fact that they were willing to try and fight fire v fire, or I guess better way to put it, wall versus walls, thinking that the tectonic plates and the wall from Ymir would be enough to simultaneously toggle a little bit of that separation factor. But the problem was, it was always Polar Bear Mike or Fino-K just being head into games or picks and bans for game number 2. And like we just mentioned, Jade Dragons do have that first pick position, so now they could try and leverage that Emoja pick for themselves, Gore, but have a feeling they might be better suited. I think the concept of the Ymir is very strong. Ymir has a lot of early game presence. He funnels very well into that whole restrictive measure that you're looking for when you're trying to isolate a backline. Jade Dragons are probably not going to be too inclined to stray away from the Ymir. I think it was really just that Yamoja as the centerpiece for why things crumbled there for Jade in game 1.
Yeah, I think there's a lot, at least everything else, it feels like there's a good way to deal with it, but that plus Yamoja made it more complicated. The Guan Yu was also an interesting one, like, caused some problems, but at the beginning of the game, I mean, we saw he was getting kind of controlled in the lane. It's just, again, the transition into the team fight, where the Leviathans typically are always the strongest, that caused a lot of trouble. And so I'm going to watch the Dragons here, specifically how they take on these bans, because this is where I think they're going to pivot and kind of flex that first pick, say, look, we're going to grab it, we're going to force you to ban something. Tiamat still available, and we know Heroin likes that.
Tiamat could definitely be a first pick opportunity up for grabs here on the Jade Dragons. Have to imagine the Leviathans, if these bans are anything like their game 1, Tiamat very likely to fall, but that would leave open the likes of a Fenrir, and Leviathan seem as though if they're going to have to pick their poison, Fenrir is not a doggo that they want to mess with in game number 2. And I think this does put Jade Dragons into a little bit of a pickle, Gore, because if they want that Tiamat, sure, they can have it, but at the same time, letting Rongyu get Yamoja in back-to-back games when this is, technically speaking, their set life on the line, it's definitely a pretty heavy risk for the Dragons here.
Their first game, it was Sol, Guan Yu, Yamoja. Like, Yamoja was their third pick. Like, it wasn't even where they went immediately, but here you're going to be able to grab 2 of those. With Tiamat on the other side, I'm certain they're going to be looking for some sort of balance. Whether or not Yarkor wants to go back to the Sol is going to be a question they answer. But they could also just go for the Yamoja, which makes way too much sense here. But if they want, they could grab the Guan Yu. Maybe Julio didn't have a great time. Maybe you wait for your solo a little bit later. They just have so much flexibility right here.
Well, Leviathans, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Yamoja, Guan Yu, that front line was a staple as far as the team sustain and team fight capability was concerned in game number 1, so can't fault them in the slightest for wanting to run it back here in game number 2. But Jade Dragons, there is a possibility that maybe Amir was just a little bit too immobile to actually escape that Yamoja. So thinking about some Guardians with a little bit more mobility, Fafnir, probably one of the first that comes to mind. Shinkten as well, possibly even a Bacchus, although a little bit more skeptical that we'll see Bacchus gameplay anytime soon. I think largely, mostly about that Belch effect and the anti-heal proc that Bacchus has naturally.
I'm going to scroll through just to see. I know, like, Yamoja got some changes. Like, it's always the interesting thing. Like, Terra technically got a small buff, but, like, just the things that are technically available to you that might create some interesting dynamics. I'm curious to see if Mike ever goes back to, I don't want to say, like, more aggressive style play, because, look, he was just playing Ymir. You're going to be aggressive on Ymir. But we've been, like, some hints people I've heard, like, discussing, like, hey, maybe Baron can function as a support right now, and maybe that gives you a duo lane where you can be aggressive. But as you had highlighted and we had talked about in game number 1, Guardians are just really good. It's kind of difficult to convince someone to say, hey, man, let's go away from those. And you ask for mobility, you ask for the Fafnir, and that's exactly what they get. I actually really like this draft as well. It feels very powerful.
But one thing is consistent here, Gore, and that's that Pandacat, despite the fact that he's on the Panzaburu, he's still going to have to deal with that River's Rebuke, and that can be rather problematic with a god that has not necessarily low mobility, but it's certainly mobility that is heavily impacted by giant river walls on either side of you. So Mike certainly got his game cut out for him if he's going to be trying to keep his hunter alive, although I think we largely saw a decent amount of 1v1 with Pandacat versus Hardcore in that dual lane. It just never really seemed as though Pandacat was able to actually close in on a kill because of Beneathem's awareness.
And I just want to give a big shout out to the Leviathans, at least on their homework, because Mercury, Fenrir, Thanatos, Pele are in the 4 of the top 5 picks that Sam goes to. Like, the next one that he has is a Wheelish, and that's, like, more dependent on the gods that are around him as opposed to just Sam. Like, they are really harping on the jungle. They are making sure Sam is uncomfortable, and I think that kind of helped them out in game number 1, forcing him away from those picks and onto something just slightly more uncomfortable, like the Raven.
Well, if Beneathem chooses to take Raven for himself, that's definitely going to cause Sam to dive real deep into that back pocket, but I'm glad that you mentioned the Awelish. If you think about it, Awelish actually has a decent focus potential against the Baba Yaga. We saw Sam on multiple instances in game 1 try to collapse onto Shinto with that Raven, and despite having rushed the Brawler's beatstick, he just never really had the damage outright to actually take Shinto down. But Awelish is definitely a little bit more of a hit or miss pick, or I think the real question arises with how well she would transition from that early to mid game into the mid-late game aspect, because she technically becomes more of like a sacrificial lamb. Like, sure, maybe you'll find a pick, but you're almost guaranteed to die for it after the fact. And this Odin switch up could possibly be for Sam in the jungle, could also potentially be for Fine OK in solo.
I'm curious to see, so you go back to, beginning of Season 7, Odin's one of the most prominent gods that anybody's playing. It has to get hit with so many nerfs before he just disappears because people are playing him constantly. And then we never see him again. It feels like a couple of people, I think, tried him earlier on this year in Season 8, but it just hasn't really kind of found its footing. But he just got a couple of buffs, a little bit of cooldown and then a little bit of physical power scaling on that stun. But this makes things a little spicier because all of a sudden that cage comes back into the mix, the control that brings with the Hunbatzel. I mean, it's a different dynamic for the Dragons, but it's something I'm excited to see.
A few different top-tier options that are available beneath them. We saw a hover of the Loki, but it's going to be Daji instead as the response, and Pao Lao have to remember a very strong ultimate, especially against the likes of an Odin, a Humbats, even the Tiamat and Dunsburg.
All in on that backline dive.
Phantom picked up from Julio at the start of this one. Just check an eye on how people are starting. Green buff, though, this time around for Polar Bear Mike on that Fafnir. He's already used the Hog, I believe, as he got 4 health potions there too. So he's going to rotate to this left-hand side here and do this too. Actually, I'm not 100% certain he did start with Hand of the Gods here. Doesn't look like he did with how quickly this all went down. But you can see that they will get to lane a little bit later than that of Leviathans. And in theory, from experience myself, I feel like, yes, we will see the level 2s tick a little bit quicker for Leviathans. That green buff myth isn't worth a ton of experience.
No, it's not. It slows down your rotation at a lane a lot. But it makes sense that Jade Dragons aren't too concerned with getting to lane because they know the pressure should go the way of the Leviathans. But decent poke already drops Yarkor to half.
But there's still going to be sustain coming into this matchup with health potions too. And checking in with all the builds across the map, starter items have been taken by everyone. Warrior's Axe this time around for Julio up against the Bluestone. A fine okay on that Odin. And I did mention the Phantom already here. We were wondering if we would see one this game, and they are going to take it.
They are, but a little bit of lacking on beads from the side of Jade Dragons. In particular, Sam for Soccer, going to be very susceptible to this Pao Lao in the early game. The second Panatom ticks over to level 5, he should shift up his focus. Instead of sitting in these lanes, instead, try and sit on Sam.
Mifflin, there's going to be people in chat going, but at the same time, Panatom doesn't have beads either, and fear no evil. In fairness, that is true.
Yeah, but you could like reaction Pao Lao to Fear No Evil pretty easily. I mean, you reaction Fear No Evil to Pao Lao, you're still getting pulled.
Why did you ever do that then?
Well, because I'm not good.
You've not got reactions. Yarkor under some pressure here as he steps forward. Panda Cat taking way more than he bargained for there. Ends up going down for a straight up 2v2 in the dual lane. It's not often we see those on the negative side of happening to the Dragons.
Yeah, tough situation. But the Leviathans drafted for this. Yamoja on her own brings a ton of lane pressure, and Chiron's kill pressure in the early game is still incredibly strong. Me and you had a little conversation between games here. We were thinking, well, there's not a whole lot of power on these Hunter builds, is there? But instead of going for that Ikavale and Atlantis start that we saw from Panda Cat last time around, Yarkor sticking to his guns, likely going to be a Transcendence.
And I think that's been good. The conversation for me specifically is I've been here since, I don't know, day 1 of Season 1, right? Like,
weird flex.
Every single year, it's always been Hunters need power. Don't worry about that. Panatom's fine. Look, at my chair, I want to know when there's a fact going to happen, right? It's not going to happen yet unless Yarkor kills Sam for Soccer here. Long you wrapping around the back 2, level 4 for Yarkor. The damage problems from the bubbles are causing there. Yarkor now with the rotation from Panda Cat gets the kill. Sam still in the fray though, and this is better from the Dragons so far. Punishing Leviathans for being overextended and taking Jules in the jungle. Wrong you just trying to buy up time, but it's not going to do anything as he falls down for the second kill. 1 for Sam, 1 for Pat.
I don't know, we're trying to build some hype. There's like cool ways to say things, and I figured
we don't need to build
give some spice to it.
There's enough going on in the game. We don't need to build hype. We just talk about what we see. It's the greatest experience ever, Myth. No one can tell us we're wrong because the pros don't even know what's right either. It's the best news. It's been 8 years since I've been this excited about a patch. Mike in the jungle are looking towards Wrong You. Paddington blinks in, and he's a ton of damage. Gets on his parallel though. Looking for the change. The Rocket Man himself, Panda Cat, was exhumed there as Mike pulled in, but Sam still kills Panatom so far. Wrong You under pressure, but Riptide's back towards his tier 2. Shinto rotating in, but look at how aggressive Horrorwind is on this Tiamat, feeling confident there as the Dragons look to keep this pressure rolling towards the dual lane.
Yeah, get used to seeing that exchange, man. The Pao Lao pulls in Sam for Soccer, who drops Fear No Evil on landing, so there wouldn't be any follow-up. But you got to think with the double pull-in onto both PBM and Sam, there should have been enough damage follow-up to kill at least one of them, unfortunately.
And trying to isolate some people. All 4 members of the Dragons on this side of the map at the moment. And it's forcing the Leviathans to also start to dance this way too. With no jungle available though, it kind of just becomes a game of, well, what neutral camps are up? And this time around it'll be a Greater Scorpion.
Yeah, it makes sense that Jade Dragons are trying to emphasize this left side of the map. That's where the leads are. 1 level in support, 1 level in ADC, and about a half level in favor of Sam for Soccer in the jungle. Purple buff can be spawning very shortly here. Leviathans there for the defense, going to be able to strip it away before the Jade Dragons get in position is what I was going to say, but Panda Cat caught out.
For a second or two, but he will manage to get away from the Riptide in time. Cost him his beads, though, to walk through that Riptide. As in the jungle, the Palau hits too, but a good Fear No Weaver from Sam
there it is.
will prevent some damage. Panitom should go down in trade, but he'll jump towards his teammate and get away. Panda Cat, meanwhile, under a lot of pressure, has to Rocket Man back to base as Mike is now left isolated and alone, but he at least has his leap away. Sam for soccer, but nothing else in that engagement.
So hard to chase down Fafnir once again to that Dragon State. That is the longest leap in Smite, full stop. It goes further than any other ability. So, Polar Bear Mike, pretty safe here. I see you're putting on your thinking cap over there. I fact-checked this.
I always like to try and make sure it's right, you know?
I got it, all right? And if it's wrong, chat will let us know.
And I was going to say, there'll be someone that's like, actually, you're wrong. It's probably Jormungandr with his 3, but it's a leap.
His 3's a stealth.
I mean, technically, yeah. Or Hades, who knows? No, you're probably right. I think you are, for the most part.
Appreciate it. Well, I pride myself on my ability here.
It's nice for you to be right now and again, you know, when you make bets with chat regularly and lose how much money. There was like 9,000 people in chat that day. Great job there.
A little 50,000. Look, they got a cool little discount code out of it. Use code Mifflin, by the way, for $5 off your first purchase all the way up until Monday. But again, we got to focus on the game, Hindu.
Yeah, Fine OK under some pressure. Here's the cavalry charges causing problems. And Fine OK is surrounded and brought down. First time we've really seen any attention from a jungler towards the solo lane, but the jungler from the Dragons is looking to pressure onto Sam, and a great rotation alongside the supporting cast of Hurrywin there on this Tiamat. Cause a lot of problems there. They bring, well, Dragons this time round, approaching 2,000 now in favor of the Dragons as they start to mount more pressure and more of a lead. Mike trading with Panitom in the jungle, Fine OK rotating in. And that's what Mike's doing here, buying time for this rotation. And the blink onto Yorkor is going to cause a problem, because guess what, Chiron? You cannot escape that ring when all you got is a giddy up. Beautiful little play and beautiful burst from Tiamat, who's still going in. Hurrywind is here to play, but he's trapped inside that ultimate, and now with a follow-up from Panitom could cause some problems. Bead's not available for Tiamat here, as the Palau now consumed. Hurrywind pulled in and killed. Fine OK still tanking up. Julio and Shinto have finally arrived, but the damage has already been done.
That's the downside of having your Phantom all the way over there in the solo lane. Julio was the only person that could have saved Yorkor from that cage, and well, he was still on the right side of the map. Once these team fights start up proper, it'll be a little bit easier to apply that defensive relic, but for now, Fine OK with the rotations should get a lot of control.
Dragon's really trying to pressure this duo side even further now with this rotation for Fine OK very early. Let's just add 12 minutes in.
Oh yeah.
That makes an impact and tries to escalate this lead further for the Dragons now. However, with Julio turning up and Leviathans on this left-hand side, they won't find the buffs they were looking for there. Red buff secured in the jungle, purple buff secured in the jungle, and now Leviathan get a cheeky window at the gold, but Dragons smell it.
It's all about whether or not they can leash it properly and try and find this fight. Fine OK has the flank and is spotted out, which means the Leviathans are going to go ahead and reset this one. But the longer the fight goes, the more it's going to favor the Leviathans. They still do have a major sustained advantage. And nice eyes, Doug. Sam for Soccer on the right-hand side of the map has not shown himself. The Leviathans do not realize how good an opportunity this is just yet.
Yeah.
But they've already started to reset back to neutral. Yorkor might be going for this new age crit build coming through. Could be Rage Deathbringer after we see a little bit more penetration.
Do we see an Assi in that build at all for that lifesteal, that sustain?
We've seen it a little bit in ranked, but it's hard to say, man. The meta is so intangible right now.
Right? Yeah. Well, generally, you're always looking for some sort of sustain in your builds as a hunter. We saw it in multiple games, and so far it's the Cowls. They've been a focus. Gold Fury reset for a second, but it will go down. Fiddle even in the jungle on Yorkor, who is destroyed. Fine OK's ring caused problems now. Wrong you on the wrong side of town. The chase is still on, but he won't find it as the Fury is taken.
Yeah, Fine OK is just not interested in the solo lane this match. Instead, has been constantly putting pressure on a Yorkor, who is unfortunately not got a Phantom for himself. Needs Julio to be there if he wants any chance to survive. Very easy to line that one up for the Jade Dragons. Odin Cage, Fear No Evil. That's going to cost him his life.
I think he's got no mana here up against Julio, and Julio just doesn't realize where the backup is. So he's going to turn his attention now, realizing the cavalry charge is on. And Panda will fall down solo towards the tail end by Julio, but how much damage was he really on? Meanwhile, mid lane, Leviathans are trying to bite off even more as the Shinto house comes online and forces Hurrywin back. But Mike's ultimate will keep them at bay for a moment or two. Leviathans is just trying to find more of an answer after losing this Gold Fury.
They're just constantly putting pressure on the map, utilizing that healing. Wrong You starting to top himself up, but Fine OK joins the fight.
But can he follow up in time? The stun's good on Wrong You, looking for that Riptide if it's available, and there it is to get a bit of separation for himself. back to safety. Back up from his team too, but now Rongyu uses the Phantom, but fine, okay. Still secures the kill, has Mystical Bale and of course the shield from the Raven Shout to cause a problem. Fear No Evil consumed there by Sam Soccer as Panatom still jumped in with that health, gets a good Paolo off onto 2, drags them in, but there's no follow-up damage, and Sam leaps to the back trying to get to Panatom, can't do so as Julio and Yorkor give separation, but Yorkor ends up dying for it. There's no re-secure kill there available for him, and then on top of that, Shinto's in trouble too.
Way to shift up the narrative, Jade Dragons. We thought the long fights were going to favor the Leviathans. Now Julio falls. Sam for Soccer takes him down. Tier 1 tower going to follow suit as well. And, well, last time around we saw the Leviathans go for an early fire giant. Jade Dragons looking to do the exact same.
In fairness with how that fight went, though, it was Leviathan's grouping trying to force that Tier 1 myth. They weren't respectful of the respawns, of the re-engages, of the people coming back from base. And Dragons just go, we can W-key really well with this composition if you don't have the damage to bring us down. And pretty much led from fine, okay, Sam for Soccer's Fear No Evil caused some problems. And with that, the Dragons now in a comfortable position. I will say,
with a 3 or 4 man core trying to push down the center. Okay. Leviathans, though, they're going for the split.
Yeah, they're trying to split it up here, Leviathans. I think just to get some global gold for the team who are behind at the moment, as we mentioned. But at the same time, it's giving up freebies down this mid lane. Could they have really defended that? Maybe. But now they're going to see John mid Phoenix here, Jade Dragons. Right-hand side, Sam split pushing and Yorkor split, and on the left, it's a 4-on-4 with a weird tale of events of who's where.
Yeah, just give Sam for Soccer a couple more seconds to start putting threat on this
Yorkor's
right side Phoenix. Yorkor has to back in this one. The mid Phoenix is burning slowly. Great ult from Rongyu.
And that will buy a moment or two. Rongyu will be fine as Polar Bear. Mike happy to tank up a couple of shots. Will leap back in again. And there's a Cursed Donk as well. Looking towards Rongyu, who has a Phantom online. Julio was trying to frontline on that cavalry charge. Took a ton of damage from the damage backline of the Jade Dragons now. The Paolo, a little bit late to the fray. Only pulls in Sam. All the while, the tanks from Dragons are zoning away Leviathans. Just no one's hitting the Phoenix just yet.
Hey, who needs a Phoenix? If you can remove enough gods from the playfield, the Titan is suddenly emerging on the menu. Instead, though, Jade Dragons going to take a play from the Leviathans book, make it a little bit slower, and instead work their way through every single one of these objectives. Right side, Phoenix now under threat.
And this is where Dragons are the most dangerous. They get a lead, and they will push it as hard as they can. 20 minutes in now, looking at the right-hand Phoenix, Shinto's house. I mean, you might as well put it on the market. No one wants to buy it now with how it looks there.
Well, then don't put it on the market.
The Titan's going down, and boy, oh boy, Myth, no surprise. We're going to go to a game 3 here between Leviathans and Dragons as the Dragons bounce back in, honestly, decent form.
Right, where they just win and then continue to win harder as the game goes on. Did not leave a lot of wiggle room for the Leviathans to find a way back into it. And a lot of this has to be with, Sam. His impact on this was completely different from game number 1 to game number 2. But I also think their ways of controlling Rongyu on that Yamoja limited the impact the Leviathans could have because their setup wasn't as regular.
That powwow just seemed like a little bit of a taxi service even at times for Sam to just get into the action a little bit
You're going to pull me in? Cool.
And that is the beauty, I think, of Fear No Evil when it comes to counter-initiation. Dragons just took one look at what happened to them in game number 1, and they're like, all right, guys, anything you can do, we can do better. We'll bring our own cages, and fine, okay, very much rocking the you're not, or I'm not trapped in here with you, you're trapped in here with me on this Odin cage. And I think between Fino and Sam, Mike didn't really have to do a whole lot of the heavy lifting this set, but I think Fino K was absolutely pivotal on this Odin pick. It just influenced so much control for the Jade Dragons and a lot of those teamfight breakdowns. And Shinto, Rongyu, Hardcore, we did not get a chance to see them thrive in the slightest.
Yeah, I think the damage numbers maybe speak more than anything right here. You get to see that Fino, Herowind, we're putting out a lot of it. Sam able to come in and help clean up those kills.
Are no longer in that first pick position. It's going to be the Leviathans taking that driver's seat for this drafting phase, and do you think that that's going to pose some issues for the responses that we see from the Jade Dragons?
It's definitely going to have to change the Dragons' style of bans. What we've seen from the Leviathans each time, Yanis, Mercury, Fenrir. They know exactly what they're going to ban, and you know what? With the Yanis start, I have a sneaking suspicion it's going to be the same thing here. But in Game 2, we saw the Tiamat traded out for the Ymir ban coming down from the Dragons. Now, I know Shinto's going to lock that in if they let him do it. So I think that the Dragons might be a little patient on it, say, let's get rid of Gilgamesh, let's get rid of Raijin, see if we can make them ban the Tiamat, or maybe the Dragons have a way that they can think of to deal with her. Otherwise, she is going to be a problem. They're going to have to go right back to what they did in Game 1.
Jade Dragons don't want to take that chance. They're just going to elect to take out Tiamat. If they're not going to be able to pick it first, they're certainly not going to give Shinto an opportunity to pilot that god choice for himself in the mid lane, and it's for good reason. I do think that Shinto is likely going to try and stray away from the Baba Yaga in this game just because of how much control. The Humbots pick specifically for Sam, it introduces another layer of dive, just because normally you'd anticipate with the Robin you have Mystic Rush, you've got a nice route, but Baba Yaga can escape from all of that with one single ability. However, not against that Sacred Monkey Toss, not against the Somersault. It's a lot more difficult, I think, for that Baba Yaga to run away from Sam on that Humbot, so it's certainly something that Shinto's going to have to keep in mind if he is interested in looking at that Baba Yaga again.
And especially because the way things have been going for him, that Hunbats was the last pick for the Dragons. It was the last thing that they brought in.
They made him go deep.
They were banning anything and everything that Sam was willing to play prior to that. They had 4 jungle bans, and yet he still ended up with something that ended up giving him the hand. So I think that they're going to have to change that, with the Umoja actually taken away this time by the Dragons. That ends up leaving open the Ymir right now, which is what they had banned in the first time around. Raijin available, which is something we've seen Shinto go back to over and over again. And yet, despite all that, it's still the Fafnir that comes through first.
There is a chance that Mike might not have full-on PTSD from game number 1 on Ymir. Could see him opting to take that choice now that Fafnir does have a little bit of lockdown potential, obviously, against an immobile god like the Ymir, but it's not Yamoja River's Rebuke type of lockdown and isolation, so Ymir could definitely be favorable, at least in terms of matching some of that dual lane pressure that Fafnir's already introduced. But more importantly, Leviathans are leaving themselves relatively open-ended here. They're waiting to see what the Jade Dragons opt for before worrying about solidifying any of their damage.
I'm actually happy to see this, because I saw Fafnir and my mind immediately started drifting towards, well, they played Soul in game number 1. You grab Soul either for Shinto or for Hardcore, and you're happy with it. Or you throw a Hunter over there to Hardcore, and that way you have the kind of double Hunter plus coercion, or coerce, that can come through with the Fafnir. A really big combo. And I think the Dragons were kind of on the same wavelength. They recognize Soul has been pretty much the go-to for Heroind when Yanis has been taken away. A very easy slot in. We just saw what Panda Cat can do on this Danzaburo. We've been seeing it for a couple of weeks now. And it's not something that you really want to be on the opposing side of, so I really like these top 2 for the Dragons.
But with the Danza and Soul locked in, Leviathans now know what to expect in terms of backline potential. And Raijin, Tyr, a lot of control being introduced right now for this top 3 out of the Leviathans. Specifically looking at this tier, Julio has already showcased the fact that he is incredibly comfortable on this pick, and this has been a relatively quiet set from Julio, so Tyr could be a god pick choice that I think just gives him a little bit more of an advantage in terms of actually having that big aggressive presence that we're accustomed to seeing from him.
Yeah, I'm excited. This is like Fafnir is maybe one you could argue, I think, because of what we've seen from Rongyu. Yamoja kind of takes the first place. Horus, depending on the meta, takes second place. But you give Rongyu literally anything that he's going to be comfortable with. Fafnir, I think, can fall in that umbrella, and he's going to look good. Raijin has been hand-in-hand with Shinto for over a year now, and the same thing could be said for Julio and Tyr. So I really like the top 3 and the amount of control that they're going to be able to bring. It definitely does feel like a lot of punch that the Dragons are going to have to accommodate for. And this Hercules pick gives them a little bit of punch back. Whether it goes to solo to deal with Tyr, or if it's PBM picking it up to be aggressive with it, I think it opens up a lot of not only flexibility for them, but just straight up aggression. We are going to fight, and we are going to fight because of this guy.
And if there's anybody who loves to brawl, it's certainly going to be Hercules. Also have to remember that Excavate could be very problematic for Shinto on this Raijin. Driving Strike as well, and the Earthbreaker. A lot of control being introduced with just one pick selection for the Jade Dragons, and that's very important when you're already working with the Danzaburu and the Soul. So much shred already against objectives. It might make things a bit difficult for the Leviathans, at least as far as the dual lane is concerned, because all these hunters that are still up for grabs, you're looking at Honor, there's Medusa, but I want to see if the Leviathans are willing to try and engage with some of that attack speed stim that Dunsburu and Soul are definitely going to be able to bring to the table. And if Hardcore is opting for the likes of potentially a Rom or Artemis, I do feel as though the new meta changes have definitely opened the pathway for those gods being a little bit more viable.
And Artemis, I mean, look, I don't get to talk about Artemis a lot, so you giving me a platform makes me happy. She did just get a buff, though, which I think is the thing that it has surprised me the most. And this is someone we haven't gotten to see, I want to say, all year. Thor has just been thrown by the wayside. No, he was played at some point earlier on, but he's not picked up often. And this is something that's interesting because I saw Hunbat's banned and I was like, oh, okay, Thanatos, Awelish, those picks that we've been talking about pretty much the entire set, they're still available now, and despite being banned in games 1 and 2. This wasn't where I expected to see Sam to go, but I actually like Thor just in general. Semi-global presence, especially with what he's able to close gaps on. You look at the mobility, yes, Raijin can technically get away from that, but you have to be very quick with it. I think his engage, no matter what, is going to be very solid, and it really lets him control, I would argue, more of the pace in the jungle.
Thor and Hercules only have one intent here, Gore, and that is to mercilessly brute force down the back line. This could be a tough game for Hardcore on that Uller. Even the Raijin from Shinto is going to have to keep an eye out for the semi-globals and all of that dive in the backline potential. But I like the Loki pickup here for Panitham. I think that Loki introduces an interesting element with the Invis, so it's definitely going to force the Jade Dragons, I think, to be a little more patient, but a classic Loki Slayer option for the last pick. Osiris can actually come through. We had a hunch that this Hercules wasn't necessarily dedicated for solo or support, and
I like the Jade Dragon. I like the draft. I really do. I wouldn't say that they're overly favored here, and I don't share the exact same concerns that the Deaths do for this Loki. Panatom on Loki, this pick in general, incredibly strong in the early game, and it has great targets here. Panda Cat has no recourse. If at any point Panatom closes gap on a Panda Cat, the dot damage from the stealth is going to remove his ability to use the leaves of the escape. If he tries to ride the rocket, you can always use Assassinate to block it out as well, so that's at least one avenue for this Loki to get involved early on. And I'm not going to argue against Yarkor's Ul and Shinto's Raijin. These are just good picks. It's a good draft.
Listen, I think Ul's solid, but I also worry about his sustainability and survivability without a beads option. Example one. Just taking the poke there a little. I'm more worried when the Thor rotations come through, right? The dump comes in, concerning. You're going to cause problems there. I will say, like, obviously with the way Smite is, and it's not just about picks, it's about how you execute those picks as well. More importantly, as we tune into Julio and Fino K in the solo lane. The Mask versus the Bluestone. How do you feel?
Mask gives you a lot of power, helps you out a fair bit, but with a multiple ability combo from Julio, Bluestone's going to be a lot of value. There's that stealth coming into play. Polar Bear Mike and Panda Cat have their ankles in 14 pieces on the battleground.
But Panitam's still under pressure from Sam, who rotates in, but didn't get enough damage off there to secure the kill yet. Loki will survive for now, as Yorko going towards a Transcendence again, where it looks like Panda Cat's still sticking with this new attack speed option we've seen out of some of the Hunters. But Sam realizing he's got a window here in the jungle to keep this pressure rolling. Panitam managed to secure it.
Just a little bit of cheeky play there, and with no hammer available to Sanford
You
Soccer.
were jungle. You were so excited about one harpy being secured. He's done it back.
He's at level 2 in the enemy jungle, stripped green buff away from Sanford Soccer, and is still denying Sam some farm. He's taking the fight? What?
Yeah, well, he's just going to keep the pressure rolling. Panitam's just trying to survive, really, and find farm in the jungle. Now forced back to base at level 2. And Sam focusing on invading and keeping this pressure rolling on the Loki in the early game. Doesn't surprise me that we see this, though.
Look, Loki is so strong in the early, but he's not just slowing down Sanford Soccer's farm, he's slowed down his own, and I think Panatom is going to be a little bit more needful when it comes to levels. The second he takes over to level 5, you have a great deal of kill potential, but he's really slowed himself.
Yeah, I will say, Sam, a little bit more utility available. Yes. As Julio just did a chunk. Meanwhile, in the duel in Yorko, he's very low but has to jump away. Mike giving chase. Fine, okay, does get that kill on Julio, though, at the tail end, after a lot was invested there on towards Sanford Soccer. Mike still wants this kill, though, and he's eating a ton of damage because of it. But he'll survive too. Meanwhile, though, Panda was on that rotation, just wondering if he could pinch the angle. Won't find it there. Action across the map as Dragons continue to invade.
Panatom's freaking me out. He walked past his own speed buff to go straight for Sanford Soccer's and he's gonna get it. No, that's his. I got mixed up. That's his side of the map. That's his side of the map.
Mike, meanwhile, though, bit off more than they can chew. Yorko stuck around here, comes back and gets the kill in the duo lane. The over-aggression from Dragons there on the duo side does end up being punished. We can go back, though, and see that first blood kill. We saw Julio take it to Sam, and straight afterwards, Fine OK is like, well, you've used everything. Guess what, baby? I'm Osiris.
Man, I want to know exactly how much HP Sam lives with there. That is a tough situation.
I'd
Maybe
say
build pathing, Transcendence first overall for this Ull, but that's the bread and butter. That's not the new stuff. We don't need to talk about that.
Speaking of Doomo, real quick, you mentioned it for Raijin, who did go for the Charon's coin so far. Horiwin, though, is investing into that Doom win next. So like you were saying, a ton of power on this, but it's very, in my opinion, situational because you need those minions to die to generate those stacks.
Yeah, it is going to make him a little bit stronger inside of these lane fights, but maybe not exactly what you want consistently. Shinto in some trouble.
Yeah, nice little combo there from him, from the boulder there from Mike, but not a ton of damage onto Shinto. As Sam's still trying to get that buff, and now Sam surrounded. Can he get in time to the sky? He can. Rocketman Panda Cat looking for an option, doesn't find one, falls back instead. With Sam being so low, the Dragons turn tail. The red buff was dropped and stolen.
Yeah, ironically, with the boots removal, people are going to be moving a lot faster now because they can get movement speed inside of their builds. That isn't just that core 18%. You get that from leveling up all the way to 7. One thing worth noting about Panatom's build, though, severely lacking in CDR.
Mike 2 levels up on Rongu as he walks towards the red buff again, leading the army of the Dragons through, looking to secure and does so away from Rongu. Throws out the ultimate to buy some time, but he's taking a ton of damage from the Loki and the ult too, as Panatom commits everything there to secure the kill. The follow-up from Horiwin was there, but it's not enough to bring down Panatom, as Sam for Soccer on the backside will set up the kill onto Shinto. A lot of the work done by Sam, but Panda Cat picks up the pieces, but now Panatom, who was waiting round the corner, gets the double kill onto Panda Cat, whose exit strategy was not the best.
Hammer used there by Sam for Soccer. Panatom, though, not close enough to follow up. Hurrywin, on the other hand, clearly in range. Yarkor chasing him out.
And Hurrywin just surrounded, trying to buy as much time as he can. Maybe get a cheeky kill with the Disapparate as well. You saw him dash towards Yarkor there. Meanwhile, Julio still chasing onto Sam for Soccer. The wall did not come down in time. And all Fine OK can do is go, he's still chasing you. He's still chasing you. There's nothing you can do.
You know, Osiris not the best at peeling. Even that slow wouldn't have been enough to stop Julio on the chase. Is able to utilize those lane minions to maintain his HP bar.
At chasing?
Not the best at stopping the chase.
Okay.
Julio, though, decides to get aggressive acts as his owner. He can at least utilize the sustain in his kit, which is why we see him doing just this.
Hurrywin just surrounded in mid lane there by Julio and Shinto. Great composition from those two, collapsing there, finding that window. Hurrywin did have beads available. Didn't manage to get him off in time that time round. Goat Fury, though, now started up by Leviathans.
And it's all on the Jade Dragons to work their way forward. PBM and Fine OK starting to make up the charge here, and Sanford Soccer does have the ultimate available. Burning quickly is the Gold Fury down to 50%.
They're going to focus in on Mike instead here, who was stepping on in. He was looking for a boulder potentially to take out, but the burst was too much. Rocket comes out from Panda, but Panda's now out of mana as Fine OK and Sam try and duel the backline of Leviathans.
Hammer used to escape and wall stuns 3. Sanford Soccer on the retreat. Yarkor, though, utilizing that movement speed to chase them out. Julio does pick up Panda Cat in the background. Yarkor does pick up Sanford Soccer. And the Leviathans, they came here for the Gold Fury, and they are going to walk away with it too. Good
decision from Leviathans, though. If you think about it, they get the pick on Hurrywin straight to Gold Fury, and then say, they're going to contest this. They're not going to let this go for free, so let's pick them apart when they're setting up.
And that's exactly no longer available. Pyromancer is up and is under threat. Panatom seems to be grouping up first, and, well, he's going to pull it first too.
Yeah, a bit of patience from both teams as relics were being regen for the most part, and abilities too. Leviathans should be able to get this Pyromancer, though, before the Dragons can get on the scene. Julio on zone work there alone was enough to keep them at bay and not allow Dragons a window, a sniff, an idea that Pyro could have been taken for themselves. Mike's a bit deep in the jungle here, driving, striking towards Rongu, I should say. But back towards his tier 1 in mid lane, he should be okay for the time being. Dragons on the back foot here, though.
Man, you could have fooled me if I blinked and didn't actually see PBM connect that driving strike. I mean, Rongu HP 5'd his HP back up before it even comes into play. PBM, though, not nearly as safe. And the same could be said of Hurrywin. Disapparate, though, going to get him out.
Yeah, Hurrywin read that well to Disapparate so early by rotating back towards that mid lane there. So Julio now in a position because of that, but doesn't take as much damage as they may have wanted there from the Dragons. Taking into account, because it's a tier 2, he does have some natural sustain in this kit, so won't need to go back to base if he just keeps using that power cleave to stack back up.
And that seems to be the play here. Both teams starting to group up around mid. Soullanders have made their rotation as well, so the Leviathans are fully sending it. They're saying, okay, we're looking for this fight. We're looking to siege this tier 1, but isn't that the downfall of game 2? We saw this exact same pace.
Yeah.
Jade Dragons were able to put up a defense. They've been here before. Can they do it again?
It's the realization, though, that the Fury's about to spawn too, so any team that gets a scrap of win here could rotate and get a decent objective off the back of it too. Leviathans have relieved the pressure as Dragons show themselves in force as well, and now the ward wars around the Fury will begin. As Panda's the first one in the area, he will come face to face with Panitom there.
We're looking at a full item disparity between these two junglers. Titan's Bane means that he's going to be doing so much more damage. Panatom, that is. But Jade Dragons are able to get at least one of the Oracles, so vision advantage not going to go either way this time around. And Jade Dragons actually the aggressors here.
Yeah, they're going to pull this Fury, reset it again. Rongu steps up, so does Julio, and it's all pressure on Sam for Soccer. Hammers away awkwardly, but it's still enough to get some separation. As Panitom still leading the charge on the front side with a very damage-focused build from the Loki. With his position, it would scream to me that he's a bit tankier than he actually is.
No,
Still, the dance of the Primal Fury continues. The right-hand side of the map not really paid attention to with the Pyromancer being down here, and both the Tier 1 towers as well. Loki does get his own speed buff though, and Panitom will be rotating to this fight. The thing I've not really seen so far though is really Sam pulling the trigger on this ultimate early. Normally you like to see these Thors be the aggressors, be the setup man, allowing Mike to give him the vision for these Thor ultimates, but I've not really seen much of that so far.
I mean, the follow-up from a range isn't great. It can't be Sam first one in because it's just Hurrywin that can put out the poke, and well, Hurrywin's the target too, drop down to 50%.
For a second I was like, uh-oh, Hurry's in trouble there, but I saw Julio rotating around, but Julio played it safe for the most part there. Didn't want to go too aggressive. He's going to work on his zone work here. That was Primal Fury pulled again. Final key on the front side, giving vision to his team. Remember, there is a boulder from Polar Bear Mike that can always be a semi-decent secure under circumstances. Soul damage too. Pretty good at securing this. But Leviathans are baiting more than anything else here if they want to take a fight.
They find Final K with the Fearless, and that does strip away his beads, and immediately they disengage. All right, that's one tool taken away. Let's reset back to neutral and try and do it again. The Leviathan's very patient inside of this engagement, but it's very clear who their target is trying to be. They want Hurrywin to step up. Julio is constantly within that Lawbringer range. If Hurrywin steps too far forward trying to follow up on CC, he's going to get a Fearless.
Mike blinks, driving strikes, doesn't find a target. Does get the Earthbreaker off though onto Julio at the tail end of that. Mike's having a rough time on the Hercules so far, not had as many windows as he would like to for setup. But here's Sam going to the sky, looking for a target and finds no one. Still on the backside, Final K dueling out with your core and has to leap away as Panda Cat follows in, and Panda Cat becomes a casualty too. Leviathans frustrate the Dragons at the Fury. Dragons make a commit and Dragons get punished.
It was so clean there from Panatom. Does exactly what you were calling for earlier on. Waits for the engagement to start up proper. Waits for Sam for Soccer to use that dunk aggressively, teleport out. Loki was on him immediately. From there, the Leviathans were able to rout the Jade Dragons, fold back into that dive, and turn it into a 3-for-0. The fight starts over the Gold Fury, but results in a Fire Giant. The Leviathans gonna pick it up.
And what can they do with off the back of it? Final K on the way though, and it's taken a while with this composition to bring it down. And maybe this could be a mistake from the Leviathans. Final K going to get surrounded on by multiple members now. Tether's on a lot, reducing the damage done, but you did hear a Sunder, as Myth says, and your core will get the kill. Mike has returned to the left-hand side of the map though, looking to farm up a little bit. Didn't realize he could have maybe got into that. Would you have wanted Mike over there even?
I'm not sure that I even wanted Final K over there. I mean, for all the good that it did, I'm Final K now on the grayscale for 40 seconds. Fire Giant still going to 5 members of the Leviathans. He wasn't trying to stop the Fire Giant from happening. He was simply going for a steal attempt, a Hail Mary.
In position, tier 2 tower on the left-hand side. And I'll still say it, I still think Dragons won in terms of draft, but in terms of execution so far, it's been all Leviathans. Frenzy popped early by Leviathans here.
And they're burning down that Phoenix. Nobody from the Jade Dragons in range to put up a defense, and it is gone before anyone even noticed.
Does he go on him here? Sam for Soccer's in the sky, dunks on down. Won't find the target he was after, or rather just plays it defensively. Driving strike from Mike on Rongu, forces Rongu to leap away. The follow-up damage from the ultimate from Hurrywin just wasn't there in time, as now Sam for Soccer's Thunder crashed onto by Shinto, giving Panitom the kill. And Shinto gets another there on the tail end. Driving strike from Mike to peel the carries away from Leviathans, but it comes in his own life. And Leviathans are looking to close out the game 16-2 here.
But there's still 2 carries alive, Breznov and Hurrywin. Tyler trying to do his best, but the Titans burning fast, and Leviathans aren't going for their signature play, or maybe they are. They do want to get a little of these BM kills.
But if they can get the kills, it pads the stats and makes them feel better, but Panda will at least take out Wrong U for these indiscretions as Leviathans take the first set of week 2, 2-1 over
Really
the
been
Dragons.
able to find themselves victorious here.
A very big statement from the Leviathans up against the Jade Dragons, because you have to remember one thing that has always been probably one of the largest critiques about this Leviathans roster is that they don't really seem to be a team that'll deviate from the norm. They find one meta play style, and then other teams will be like, oh yeah, they're just a little predictable, but that predictable nature seems to have been shrugged off as once that old meta left the presence of the Smite game, Gore, and I'm very impressed, especially in the way that Leviathans were able to control games 1 and 3. Game 3, we actually felt as if the Jade Dragons had a stronger composition in terms of controlling the early to mid game, but the execution was all Leviathans.
And I mean, that's sometimes all it comes down to, right? It's like, hey, we have a better draft. We're going to be able to keep track of you. Oh, you just played better today? Okay, well, we can't do anything about that. And that's pretty much what happened. I mean, Julio was absolutely running the show, like, at the beginning and through a lot of those fights on that tier. But as it transitioned, I mean, you start to see Shinto really grow into it. Panatom's 5-0-7. Hardcore goes 4-0-9. Like, they're just creating so much room, so much space. And like you said, executing on a higher threshold to just make everything work better. That despite the Dragons having what felt like some counter picks and ways to control the Leviathans, they ran away with it.
Having to go a little bit of an update, Atlantis Leviathans will clinch that #1 position still. Granted, we are only 2 weeks in, plenty of Smite game action to come for the Smite Pro League, but it is definitely a good feeling walking away with a W against a team as strong as the Jade Dragons.
And they have to hold on to it for, what, the next 2 hours, because somebody in the next set is going to tie up there and at least give them a little bit of a run for their money.
And that's another thing that you can't really ever count out. Olympus Bolts versus Camelot Kings. One of these two are also obviously not necessarily trailing behind Atlantis Leviathans by any means, but we're definitely going to get an opportunity, I think, to just see a further breakdown of some of these mid-season changes that have taken place